Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a text that many of us think we know, the Gospel of Mark. But we're going to look at it from a different angle, not just as a religious work, but as a brilliant and pretty risky piece of political pushback aimed right at the heart of the Roman Empire.
All right, so let's start with the very first line. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Now, for billions of people, this is a foundational text. And on the surface, it sounds like a pretty standard religious opening, right? It feels familiar, almost simple. But here's the thing. What if for the people who first heard it, living under Roman rule in the first century, this sentence was anything but simple? What if these exact words were a direct and frankly a dangerous challenge to the emperor himself? A shot across the bow of the whole imperial system.
To really get the explosive meaning packed into this one verse, we have to do a little time traveling. We need to understand the language of power in the Roman Empire. We have to hear these words the way a first-century subject of Caesar would have.
So, let's take that word gospel. In the original Greek, it's euangelion. Now, this wasn't some churchy word back then, not at all. It was a political term, and it belonged to Caesar. This was the word used for official state announcements, the good news of an emperor's birthday or a huge military victory.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Look at this inscription. It was found in what's now Turkey, and it's all about celebrating Emperor Augustus. It literally calls his birth the beginning of the good news for the whole world. The message couldn't be clearer. Caesar's arrival has kicked off a new divine era of peace for everyone. And it's the exact same story with the title Son of God. You see, after Julius Caesar was assassinated, the Roman Senate declared him a god. So what did his adopted son, the one who became Emperor Augustus, start calling himself? Divi Filius, which means son of the divine one. In Greek, the language Mark was writing in, that's Theohuios, son of God. It was a major claim to divine power.
And you have to understand, we're not talking about some obscure philosophical ideas here. This stuff was everywhere. You'd see it carved into buildings, you'd hear it in official speeches, and you would literally hold it in your hand every single day on the coins you used to buy bread. These phrases meant one thing: Caesar is in charge. Okay, so with all of that context in our back pocket, let's circle back to Mark's opening line one more time.
I mean, when you put them side by side like this, wow, the connection is just impossible to ignore, isn't it? Mark is grabbing the exact political vocabulary of the Roman emperor, gospel and son of God, and he's using it to announce somebody else entirely.
This is no accident. This is a deliberate, subversive move. Mark is hijacking the language reserved for the most powerful man on the planet and handing it over to a crucified Jewish craftsman from a backwater province. It's a direct challenge, basically saying that the real good news and the true Son of God isn't the guy in the palace in Rome.
So what's going on here is what a lot of scholars call double coding. It's brilliant, really. It's a message that works on two levels at the same time. If you're a Jewish reader, you hear the fulfillment of prophecies. But if you're a subject of the Roman Empire, you hear a direct challenge to the emperor's authority. It's a political argument wrapped in a biography.
And this challenge doesn't just stop at verse 1, not by a long shot. The entire rest of the gospel keeps this theme going, basically building a case that Jesus is a better, more powerful ruler than Caesar.
Many experts believe Mark was probably written during the reign of Emperor Vespasian, who was an absolute master of propaganda. So what does Mark do? He seems to write what you could call a counter-resume for Jesus, going point by point to show how Jesus completely outperforms the emperor.
And you can see this strategy playing out so clearly. Roman propaganda said Vespasian healed a blind man. Okay, fine. Mark's story has Jesus healing the blind, the deaf, the paralyzed, and oh yeah, raising the dead. Vespasian commanded Rome's famous military legions? Well, Mark shows Jesus commanding a legion of demons. He even beats the emperors at their own game of virtue, like humility, by constantly rejecting fame and honor.
But this next one? This is maybe the most audacious move of all. Mark takes Vespasian's greatest military victory, the brutal crushing of the Jewish revolt and the destruction of their sacred temple, and he completely flips it on its head. He argues it wasn't a Roman triumph at all, but an act of God's judgment that Jesus himself had predicted would happen. It's an incredible way to disarm Roman propaganda.
So, okay, that's a lot of history, but why do we care? Why does reading this ancient text as a political document really matter for us today?
Well, for one, it totally reframes the gospel. It's not just a spiritual story. It's what some scholars call infrapolitics, which is really just a way of saying it's a subtle, coded story of resistance. It's a story written for people living under the thumb of an empire, a way for them to quietly push back and claim their own truth against this massive, overwhelming power.
When you boil it all down, the Gospel of Mark is making this incredibly bold argument. It's saying, hey, the real good news, the true beginning of a new age of peace and justice, it didn't start with an emperor in a marble palace in Rome. It started with a carpenter from Galilee. And his kingdom, not Rome's, is the one that's ultimately going to last.
And that really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? This whole reading challenges us to look for the politics hiding behind the prose. And if this kind of imperial code is baked so deeply into a text we thought we knew so well, what other radical messages are out there, just waiting to be decoded in the stories we think we know?